Great. So, hi everyone. Our team has been looking at sea ice flows in the past week. We have called ourselves the team that's going with the flow because that encapsulates both our topic and how we proceeded through the week. So who are we? We have Mukund, Sean, Xueke, Young, Petra, and me. And maybe a couple of people knew each other beforehand, but in general, we were all strangers with quite a variety of backgrounds. But we were all interested in sea ice, so that's what brought us together. So we had quite a lot of aims, which we broadly separated into personal and scientific aims. We wanted to learn about ICESat-2, accessing and handling data streams in an efficient way, and also developing the main skills that we've learned a lot about this week, as well as connecting with different people. I think the networking opportunities here are really great. Scientifically, we thought it would be pretty interesting to try and identify sea ice flows. We're focusing on Antarctica, with the ultimate aim of trying to understand what external forcings are affecting flows. And so we've been playing around with some different parameters that you can get from the products to see if we can find anything useful there. And part of that is to look into different products that can be used alongside ICESat-2, both other ice products, but also trying to get some information about the forcings as well. So this is a little image of some sea ice flows around Antarctica. You can see the sea ice region here, and you can see it's not a continuous ice cover. It's made up of lots of flows and with some leads and gaps in between. And trying to characterize these can be quite difficult sometimes, depending on what information you can get, but ICESat-2 is a good candidate for this. So what we've been looking at with ICESat-2 is the ATL07 and ATL10 products. So from ATL07, we get surface height and type. And then the ATL10 is a bit more of a processed one where we can start to get more parameters to work with, but there are fewer tracks than ATL07. And some important physical parameters to think about in this sense is when you're interpreting the data, it's a little difficult close to the coast and in summer as well. So these are things that we have to think about when we're trying to understand what we're seeing. So I said other data. Here are a couple of examples of some of the other data sources that you can start to look at if you're trying to understand what might be affecting the sea ice, but also more information about the sea ice itself if ICESat-2 is struggling. And we had, so because our group had a variety of experience with these different products and different coding experience and things, we sort of took a few different directions with how we were approaching this, and someone spent dedicated time looking into these different forcings, and you can see on the bottom left here is an example of a 10-meter wind gust from era 5, and preliminary investigations suggest that we could use that for looking at forcing if we want to try and understand a case study with a storm event and the effect of that on sea ice flows, for example. So we've done some investigations in that direction. And we also had a different starting point from looking at the data itself as well. So for some of us, part of the week was to try and understand just how to read in the data and give a first glance. And it's interesting to see what we can get just from the products themselves before we try to do any further interpretation. So for example, if we take a section through the Weddell Sea, this is an example along a transect here. This is track 0993. We can get the sea ice freeboard concentration and lead length from ATL 10 quite nicely. And looking along the transect itself, it's quite noisy. There are 4 different colors on the time series to the left, each representing a different cycle in 2019. So we have 1 transect per season, as it were. And that's a little hard to interpret, but if we look at the bottom right here, we can see, you can start to bin that into frequency of different fields. So for example, on the left, we have the lead length, and on the right, we have a sea ice freeboard as a histogram of the frequency of these different fields per season. And you can see some quite nice patterns there, which I won't go into, but there's definitely some differences in the seasons with those fields. Obviously, then you have the questions of how much you can interpret from a certain section, and 1 time slice per season and missing data and things. So based on these initial things, we can also zoom into a particular event, for example. So if we want to try and understand how it fits into external forcings, there are some results here showing the sea ice height in 2019, these left panels here, spanning a time period either side of a storm event here. And this storm event was shown by Petra, one of our teammates, to have a big effect on the ice shelf in the Amery region here, the Amery ice shelf in Antarctica. And we were interested to see if there was also an effect on the sea ice. And you can see that there is a surge around this date due to the cyclone, which is not seen in subsequent years where there wasn't a storm. So we're really interested to try and focus on something like this in the context of external data a bit more, to see what else we can infer. So that's 2 examples of reading in the data from the files, but we can try and quantify this a bit more. So we've also been looking into some correlations between, on the top row, flow size versus freeboard. And this is in the Amundsen Sea sector now. And on the bottom, flow size versus roughness, which is a standard deviation of the freeboard there. And we can see there's perhaps some patterns, but we need to look into it more. I should say the first column here is in November, where the ice is more compact. And in the middle column here, we have ice that's less compact. And there are some differences between those. And to look into those examples a bit further, we can use these as situations where there is actually Sentinel-2 data accompanying those transects. So if we take those 2 examples and try to understand what's going on between ICESat-2 and Sentinel-2, we have the less compacted sea ice example here. And you can really see there's gaps between the flows. And if you use the transect and identify, which one was this? The flow size, I think that was the flow size, for each, you can see, yeah, flow size. You can see that the Sentinel-2 and ICESat-2 actually tend to agree pretty well from each beam. If we look in a compacted case though, there's more of a disagreement for each beam across this section here. And that may well be due to the different the spacing in the leads not necessarily being open water, but very thin ice, which confuses the signal. So that's something we would like to look into more. And finally, what is really nice to try and use this high resolution along track ICESat-2 data alongside the Sentinel-2 is to try and learn information about each data set that we can't get from one alone. So this is the not compacted case one more time. And if you test, so this is a track here, and if you choose the length of this arrow, the track, to be different distances, 5 to 35 kilometers, and choose a buffer region of 3 kilometers, you can see how much this track represents the surrounding area in Sentinel-2. So we've been trying to understand the lead fraction obtained from each of these. We're aware that one is in 1 dimension and one is in 2 dimensions, but can we get some information from this? And it seems like at shorter scales, there is less clustering of the points, whereas at higher scales, larger scales, the points are a lot closer together. And if we look in the compacted case, it's a lot harder to understand these correlations. So this is something that's a work in progress, but it's something really exciting that we hope we can get somewhere with. So what we learned scientifically, I think I've summarized it already, but essentially ICESat-2 is great. And we're hoping to use it to explore fine-scale sea ice dynamics in response to atmospheric events by combining it with other data. And we can also try to understand things about the flow size in relation to what you would derive from Sentinel-2 to try and enhance the 2 data sets a bit more. And there are varying results compared if you compare a compact case to not compact case. So we think we can learn something about the ability to get these retrievals from each of those. There's lots of exploration more to do. And personally, we've learned a lot as well. Most notably, collaboration boosts efficiency, which is great, because if you have a bad skill, you can learn it better, but you can also delegate, and that's really great. Also, in terms of coding, there's a lot of really powerful tools that have been presented this week that are now a lot less scary. And the first step to not understanding something and trying to is to ask for help. And I think this has been a great space to be doing that this week. I think we've also learned that if you use knowledge from people from different backgrounds, then you can actually have ideas that you might not have had before, which is really productive for science and also really exciting to be doing something new. So we would like to carry on with this work. We're going to stay in touch and see where it goes, really. And I think that's everything we wanted to say. Someone else can chip in if they'd like, but we'd like to say a big thank you to organizing this week. It's been really great for everyone involved, I think, and it must have been a lot of work. So thank you for your help and your patience, and it's really helped all of us to go in new directions, I think. So I will leave it there. Thank you.